Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted today by Janita Flowers, and here's Janita.
Welcome to It's a Woman's World. My name is Janita Flowers, and I'm so excited to be here today. And I'd like to introduce my co-host here today. Hi, Gail. Gail Roddy is here joining us today. How are you?
Hi, I'm just fine, Janita. Glad to be here.
Yes, definitely. And also Catherine Kelly. It's nice to finally meet you, and welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Thank you. And I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Maure Ann Metzger. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Dr. Metzger is an author, and she recently wrote a book called A Prison Called School, where she addresses some of the issues that students are facing in the education system. So once again, welcome.
Thank you.
And so to get started today, can you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to write this book?
Well, I've worked in education for 27 years. And when I was doing my doctoral research, I interviewed students that had been in my leadership classes. And these are students that are in either alternative programs or special ed programs. And in interviewing them, most of them said it was this leadership class was the only place and time, only or one of the very few places and times they felt they had a voice and even held value within the school, their school careers. And that just really bothered me and stayed with me, that they felt they just didn't hold value, they didn't have a voice, they didn't really matter in school. They were just there to get in, get their work done, and that was their role. So my students and I were presenting at a national conference not too long after that, and I wanted to check out with the adults who work with youth. It was a national conference around youth, and there were adults who worked with youth in community settings, workforce development, incarceration, education. So at the beginning of our workshop, I asked the audience, how many of you in here think we do a pretty good job of valuing our youth in this country, particularly the age group here today, which was about 16 to 19 years old? It's about 130 people in the audience. Not a single hand went up.
Wow.
I was floored. I didn't expect a lot of hands to go up, but I didn't expect that none would go up. And so I said to the audience, it took me a minute to kind of catch my breath, and I said, and then think about the young people who are of minority, who are of a different sexual orientation, live in poverty. That valuation goes down even more. So I decided, it just stayed with me, it haunted me, that hearing it from the young people, and then also seeing that adults that work with youth also see that. And so I just, I thought we have to change this.
And when you say the students felt as though they did not have a voice, are they saying in what is being taught? Are they saying they don't have a voice when it comes to how they get to respond to overall their educational experience? Like, what are they not feeling heard about?
Pretty much everything. They feel, again, in the interviews I did with them for the research, they said it's pretty much all about the teachers. The teachers are at the front of the room. It's a one-way experience. We're just there to sit and listen. We don't get to have a say. We don't get to participate. We don't get to be a part of it. We're just there as basically passive recipients.
And this metaphor of the prison, where did that, how did that kind of eventually hit you, that this is really what it is?
Well, I worked with a lot of young people through 20-some years who experienced it as a prison, and a lot of them felt at different times, they would say that, this is like a prison, I feel like I'm in prison here, and I've heard parents use that as well. We call it the prison. So, particularly parents whose children struggle in school. So that was just a word that they used. It was a word that parents used. And then after doing the research, it was very apparent that they do feel they're there just to fit the system and do what the system asks of them.
And I think in many cases, I don't know if you guys agree, but it seems like the system says to the children, we're here to control you, and don't go out at lunch, don't go out later. And there's almost like a fear that there's too many young people in one place, and they're going to move, and when they do, all hell could break loose. Were you hearing some of their sense? Do they sense fear from other people?
Well, they certainly sense that. It's very controlled. They feel very controlled in their environment. And interestingly enough, the very origins of education is to control social disorder, and the other one was to prepare people for a manufacturing economy. So that's how
where
we.
the 8 to 5 came
Yes.
from, going, or 8 to 3 going to school. So you would be trained Monday through Friday
Yep.
to
And-
work in a factory.
Yep, stand in a line, sit in a row.
Have lunch
You're
at a
over
certain
there,
time.
I'm over here, I'm the boss. So yeah, and I was able to work in my career through the leadership programs I did. I was able to work with students in a very different capacity, and we were partners in learning, we were partners in service learning, we were partners in exploring out and learning out in the community. And I really noticed the difference when we were out in the community with how other community programs work with youth and how we did in education. So it became even more glaring to me, that difference of how when youth are in the community, how they're treated within certain programs is very different than school. And being able to work with them in that capacity was so inspiring, but then we were still working against the system. Students had to, you know, oftentimes other staff would say, yeah, they're only that way, they only act like that because they're in your class. So that told me something too. It's like when we do empower them, so they do rise up and they do participate and they lead. But when we put them back in that situation where sit down, listen to me for 50 minutes, yeah, they might act out or they might check out because they just don't have a part, an active voice.
So going back to the point that Catherine made about the metaphor, prison called school, is definitely a very powerful one. And so when I think about some of my friends that are teachers and why they go into education and their passion for students and helping them to learn, how do we make it, how do we explain it where school has to be an environment where there is some amount of control so that learning can happen, but there's still enough flexibility so that students can share their perspective. Where is that bridge, or how do we go from that amount of control that needs to happen to where it's like a prison? Like what's going on there?
Well, one thing that I address pretty in depth in the book is it's a deeper issue than just how we change our classrooms or even our interactions. We first have to value youth in this country. Finland, which has like the #1 educational outcomes in the world, they are #4 on the overall child well-being index, while the United States is number 26. So we first have to really value and take good care of our children, and that's not just in school, that's across society. But that'll play out in school, and we can certainly start that valuation in school, is really seeing young people as holding value, that when they come in our doors, they already have something to contribute. They're not just there for us to kind of open them up and pour things in. They bring a lot of things with them as well. Another piece is by making our learning much more active and community-based, like tear down those walls. That's what I think about, you know, both the physical and otherwise within our schools, and let them bleed in and out of the community. We did a lot of learning in our leadership class out in the community, and we brought the community in, and that was so motivating, and that's why I believe youth were really plugged in. Plus, they could make a difference. That was a piece that they always talked about is, wow, people listened to me. I was able to help change something. I was able to impact.
And they seem to have been so involved recently in all of these earning money for causes, and they're so good on social media for doing those things.
Yes.
They want to make a difference, I think.
Absolutely.
Did you find any sense that we've got to do something that makes what they learn applicable to their actual lives, what they're doing?
Absolutely. That's, again, a huge piece. That when I interviewed 7 young people who have their real first names and real first-hand stories and experiences. I also reference others, but there were 7 former students who really wanted to be a part of this change. And they all talked about that, the need to have learning that applies to, that I can use in my life right now and for the future. So that means it needs to be active versus passive. It needs to be out in the community, linking with the community. It needs to be able to help bridge them to either beyond school, college life, career. And that's so critical. One young man in his interview said, you go to school and you do a lot of paper and pencil things, And then you get a piece of paper that says you've done a lot of pencil and paper things, but that doesn't prepare you for life. And another young man said, you get a lot of food when you're in school, but you don't get a platter to carry it on. You don't get those bridges to, you know, here's all this information, but what do I do with that? And how does that apply to life? How does that help me when I'm done here? So,
Well, that system worked for several generations. Why do you think it doesn't work anymore? Is it because we get so much information now out of school? In other words, kids are more savvy than we were. Do you think?
Absolutely.
I'm just asking if
I
you
think there's a lot of factors. I think our profile of student is changing. Our schools are much more diverse
Yes.
in many, many ways. You can get anything, Khan Academy online. You can take any course, any kind of information you need. You can learn it there. And I think the profile of student is shifting in other ways too because of the internet and because of technology. It's just really forcing us to really look at the profile of our student and teach differently because of the era that we're in right now.
They see so much more of the world than we ever did.
Absolutely.
It's at their fingertips.
And things happen quicker. I mean,
right.
you know, to sit and listen for 50 minutes. I mean, a 3-minute video is really long now to watch a 3-minute video on YouTube. So to sit for 50 minutes and listen, that just doesn't fit with a lot of our students.
And I remember the encyclopedia of our day where, you know, it was really outdated by the time it was published. But now, I mean, everything is outdated quickly.
Unless they're right on their social media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we just see so much more now, and you can't confine people like you could a couple generations ago.
At the same time, while students are constantly changing and learning information that's being, you know, submitted to them seconds at a time, some of the basics that the education system is based on is missing. So simple things like manners, simple things, how do you carry yourself in a job interview, simple things of how do you talk to an adult, what is eye contact, some of the simple things that just come through in education, what is basic math, and maybe we don't need basic math because if we can't figure it out, we'll tell Google to figure it out or, you know, whatever it is, but some of those things are missing, so there has to be some sort of way to be able to build on that foundation while still being able to adapt to all the things that students are exposed to.
I worked with young people who struggled, but I want to just really clarify they're not young people who are not bright, not intelligent, but it's these other challenges and struggles both outside of school and in school that kind of take over.
And some of that, though, I think is just adolescence is tough. And, you know, your brain is still developing and you're learning things. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out who you are separate from your family. You're trying to figure out your social and peer groups. So adolescence is a tough time anyway. So it seems there has to be some things that are just consistent for students so that when they're in a time of so much fluctuation, they can rely on some things. Because I think about when I was in school, the stuff that I did, and I'm thinking, wow, you know, I could have done better, but I did the best with what I had at that time.
Absolutely.
Because I was an adolescent.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, I don't know how that factors in as well. I mean, education can't always completely change, I guess, because everything around them are changing. Aren't there some things that have to stay like a foundation or a basis, and then you just change the things that can be fluid, like how they get the information or where we're going to get the information, but the information is still the same?
Well, I think even the information, like we talked a little earlier, even the information that they learn can change. I think, and again, the students that were interviewed said, we do need the basics. We do need those basic, you know, skills and information, but not so much of it, and to bring a balance of real life education in as well, things that I'm going to be able to apply right now, skills that I can take into my future. So it's finding that balance.
And I think what you might be arguing for is a real shift. We can get to those basic information pieces, but we don't have to do it the same way.
Exactly.
We can get there differently. And the way they function today, it seems like, I don't want to read how to do that. Let me just play with it. I'll figure it out.
Right.
So if you put people in groups and they were practicing to get ready to run a meeting or do something, instead of learning about how to do it, they actually started to do it. And then we could be guides on the side. What they're saying, you know, keep the faculty from, don't be a sage on the stage. Just be a guide on the side.
Yes.
And as they then were running it, you'd be able to say, well, you kind of are beginning to lose people over here. Maybe you need to see if you can look at them, pull other people in, and you can guide people into finding those things out.
Absolutely, and there are schools that are doing that, both in the United States and other countries as well, where it's really on the students to do the problem solving, and the teacher's really there just to guide, step in periodically, etc. So,
But it's not the public school.
some of them are, yes.
Okay.
There are some kind of more innovative schools where they are using these approaches. They're far and few between. And so, of course, I'm advocating that more of us do that, use that kind of approach. And the engagement and motivation of students goes way up when those kinds of approaches are used. You can't, they're hard to use in a mega school or where there's thousands of students and 40 students in a classroom, so it's certainly more challenging.
Tell us what your impression is of Minnesota. Are we trying some of these things? Are faculty, students, I mean teachers in the high schools and the grade schools, are they getting training? Because I think it's a really new way of teaching too.
It is. I don't know exactly how we compare to other states. When I researched some of the schools and programs that were doing it differently, there weren't any in Minnesota that came up. It's not saying that they're not doing it, but when I was doing all the research, Minnesota did not come through. We came through for our racial disparities in education, and we came through on some negative things and dropout rate, but not so much at the innovation end.
Well, Maure Ann, as we wrap up this segment, your book, A Prison Called School, what are you doing now? What's next? Are you training educators? Are you just continuing to expand on this research and you're planning another book? What's next for you? And if people wanted more information, how can they learn about the book?
Yes. Well, some of the former students in the book and I are going out training. We will be training at some state educational conferences and hopefully national at some point as well. I say that I'm the messenger and they're the message, so I appreciate that these young people that are now 5 to 6 years out of high school are still willing. They feel that strongly about lending their voices, and we'll be out speaking and working with any groups that are willing to just be open to change and to help them begin to make those changes.
Thank you so much. And is there a website where they can?
Yes. There's a Facebook page for the book, A Prison Called School, and then the website is Empower Solutions, the letter M, and then the words Power Solutions, empowersolutions.org.
Thank you, Dr. Maure Ann Metzger, for joining us today and sharing more about your book, A Prison Called School. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate being able to be here and to chat with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're just going to shift gears a little bit, and Gail Roddy, who is one of our co-hosts here, is going to talk to us a little bit about performance art. And I know that's something that you do around the Twin Cities, so tell us about that, Gail.
Well, this is a relatively new thing for me, and it's just a passion for me because I love bringing multi-generational women together. But they can be 10, they can be 90. I love bringing them together in conversation about the life passages that all women go through. So it's exciting for me to perform in various venues. I've performed at bridal showers, I've performed at birthday parties for 10-year-olds, and I have a series of small vignettes that I perform in these situations, and I absolutely love it. It causes immense dialogue even among the 10 to 12-year-olds. It brings immense dialogue even with the 85-year-olds that I've performed for. So performance art is simply a performance where it's generally one person, but it can be more than one, where you're performing where your whole body is involved in the dialogue, in the monologue. It's kind of like soliloquy. If you know what soliloquy, it's like Shakespeare's Hamlet, where he's saying to be or not to be, where it's kind of talking out loud. That's kind of what this is I'm talking out loud for women of different generations.
So how did you stumble upon this art?
I stumbled upon it simply by doing it. Okay. It's always been a joy for me to perform, to speak, and so I just kind of jazzed it up with costumes and things like that and found out at over 60 that I absolutely love it.
That is awesome. Well, with all of that, up next, Gail will actually do a demonstration of a short performance entitled Life Passages. I'm excited to see that. Thank you so much for joining us on It's a Woman's World.
Good morning. Today's my 18th birthday. I'm supposed to be a grown-up now, right? I get to smoke cigarettes if I want to. I get to go to the casino and gamble if I want to. Not old enough yet to buy alcohol, but that's okay. Beer is gross and makes me sleepy. In a couple of months, it'll be time to go to the prom. I went to the prom last year with Jacob. This is the senior prom. I'm sure he'll ask me again. What a snooze fest that was last year with Jacob. Mom thinks he's a cutie and says, what an intelligent and wonderful young man. Yeah, right. And then after prom, in a couple months after that, I'll graduate. And then it's on to college. Yes, I'm going to a college 500 miles away from this town and my family. I get to finally be who I am. For 18 years, I've lived according to how my parents want me to live. And I'll get to date whomever I want to date, whomever I'm attracted to. No more dating and sleeping with nice young people. But is that the right way to live? Aren't I supposed to be a dutiful daughter? I've lived 18 years the way my parents expected me to live. Shouldn't that continue? Aren't I supposed to live a life where they're not ashamed of who I am? They don't know who I am. I've never dared to let them know. And you know, in reality, I'm ashamed and terrified to let anyone know who I really am. Perhaps I shouldn't be revealing this experience, for I'm sure there's no one here who knows what I'm talking about. Good morning. Happy Saturday. This is my last Saturday as a single woman. Next Saturday is my wedding day. It's going to be a wonderful day. I can't wait. You know, my mom has just pulled rabbits out of hats to help me plan and put out all the things that need to be done for 200 guests. My mom is the greatest mom, the greatest, smartest woman in the whole world. I'm so excited to be getting married. You know, my fiance and I, Morgan, we had a fight last night, a big fight. We have had quite a few fights over the last 6 weeks, but it's just stress. You know, everyone would say, that happens to everyone. It's just the stress of the upcoming wedding. Don't worry about it. I know I love him, and he loves me. We're ready to get married. That's for certain. We're both 26. We're out of college. We have a fantastic career going. He loves his career. Me, meh. Let's just say that I'm moving further into it. About a week ago, Morgan and I sat down to a dinner that he made. He's a much better cook than I am. And he asked me, is everything set for the wedding now that all the invitations have been sent? And I said, absolutely, everything's good to go. You can't get out of this now, buddy. I saw a flash of terror rise up in Morgan's eyes, and his lips drained of their color. And I thought to myself, isn't that same flash of terror I saw in my own eyes the other day when I was standing in front of the mirror brushing my hair? And I wanted to ask Morgan, do you hear that screaming in your chest that screams, no? Perhaps I shouldn't be sharing this experience, for I know there's no one here who knows what I'm talking about. Good morning. That was a wonderful party last night. Oh, my head is pounding though. You know, normally 2 glasses of wine is my limit. But the caterer filled it up again, and me, like a silly, stressed out goose that I was, I drank that 3rd glass. It was a party last night that was hosted by my friend Martha. Martha's a tenured professor, brilliant, gifted woman. And she always gives this big extravaganza party at the end of the academic year and invites all her learned friends. Martha has lots of academic letters behind her name. So does her husband, George. Now, I'm not intimidated by people who have a different lifestyle than I do. I can hold my own in any kind of conversation. But those learned, tenured professor friends of hers, they are a little bit intimidating. And they ask that question every time. Where do you teach? I don't. Well, then what is your profession? I didn't finish college. I went for a couple years, didn't like it, so I dropped out and never went back. But I don't tell them that. They don't need to know that. It's not important. I simply stand up straight and proud and say, I'm CEO of my own company that I started at my kitchen table 15 years ago. We employ 25 full-time and 5 part-time staff. I thoroughly enjoy what I do. And I do. And I do feel successful. But how come this morning I'm lying here thinking about all the little slights that those people said to me to make me feel like I'm lesser than they are? They did no such thing. That's all in my mind. I feel I'm successful. But how come I have those moments when I feel like a fraud? How come I have those moments when I feel around certain people that I am just an imposter? Perhaps I shouldn't be revealing this experience, for I know no one here knows what I'm talking about. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.